Unfortunately, politicians around the world respond to what is a political and electoral issue. And the reality is, in a country like ours where you have to provide the basics, climate change, I wouldn't say climate change is not an electoral issue, but it's not an electoral issue from the topics we're talking about. Whereas if you go to,
it's not really that.
I'll tell you, in fact, I would tell you my experience 11 or 12 years ago when there was a debate in Parliament on climate change, on global warming. The kind of MPs who participated in that debate from rural areas, from urban areas, there is an interest. People are understanding, farmers understand that rivers which were otherwise perennial are now becoming seasonal. And it's linked to global warming. Now, how do you debate the solutions? Yes, those are not electoral issues. So if you have a Mumbai municipal election coming up later this year, will district cooling become a primary electoral issue? I doubt.
But heat should.
It should.
Heat and the dust.
It should, yes. So now air pollution, I would say in Delhi, in the NCR region, has that become an electoral issue? Was there an electoral issue in the last election? It was to some extent. More than it's ever been.
Yeah.
But so these are issues. But yes, there are. It's certainly we're not Scandinavian countries where these issues make and break governments, and it'll take a long time for India to reach that stage. Let's be honest. And should we be debating these, and should these be the primary electoral issues? In my opinion, yes. Would I like to fight elections based on these issues compared to other issues? Absolutely. But it will take time to reach that stage. But having said that, I think now I'm sensing more than ever at a local level far more political will, interest, public buy-in to rapidly develop the city. Again, is the sustainable aspect of it coming in in a political way? Not as much as we should. So that's something which the media, think tanks and others should certainly also educate the electorate. I think once the electorate realizes that this is important, that while we have infrastructure, we have development, we have housing, we have redevelopment, we also do that in a sustainable way, let's be honest, that pressure will come on politicians. And you will see politicians respond.
So my question is, when we work with city governments, a lot of narrative to the cities, basically comes from the state leadership or from the national leadership. How can we make cities more empowered? Just, taking the case of UDCPR. Leaving Mumbai apart, for all the other Maharashtra cities, there's just one UDCPR that, all the cities have to follow. Amravati is different from Nashik, Nashik is different from, Jalgaon or something like that. So how can you make cities more free? And what kind of, governance reforms can we accept to, enable something like climate action planning? Because, they currently lack the legal tooth. We develop a climate action plan for Mumbai, but there's no legal backing to that. So how do you see?
That's the heart of the question. I mean, that's the core question that you raised, which is everything comes down to urban local governance, and that's an area which India is woefully behind on. And the one-word answer is devolution. You have to devolve more powers to cities. I often, throughout my political journey, I've been a huge activist of more devolution of powers to Mumbai's local government. And I often, to my Mumbai friends, when they talk about urban issues, I always ask people to name who the city's mayor is, and nobody knows who the city's mayor is. And to be fair to them, that's because the mayor has limited powers. The mayor doesn't have executive powers. So there is a provision in the constitution, but unfortunately, it isn't implemented in letter and spirit. And I think the central government, through various urban funds that it disburses to states, has the ability to incentivize, use a carrot and stick approach to push state governments to ensure that there's devolution of powers. And that is the surest way to ensure that you will have the kind of governance that you need. Because let's be honest, I mean, for those of us who are from Mumbai, anytime there's a calamity, natural or otherwise, whether there's a terror attack or there's a flood, you never see the mayor in the way that you will in a city in another part of the world. And that's the aspiration that I hope for Mumbai. Again, to be very candid with you, are these electoral issues? Sadly not. I've tried, I can tell you, to make these electoral issues in various elections, but it's hard to explain to a voter that if power is devolved, you will get a stronger government, a more responsive government that can respond to your needs quicker, that can plan for these things. But there are provisions, as I said, these provisions exist in the Constitution. They just need to be implemented.
While driving to this place in an Uber, I could see a building in which already it was written 60 floor, and I think counting further. So with 60 floor, 70 floor building, recently a friend of mine told me his son is staying on the 78th floor. I tell you, on the higher floor, you really realize the cooling need that you have. Now, with this kind of a scenario, I think district cooling system is the answer, or could be the answer.
This is Africa. I know if you look at it closely enough, you'll find shades of India in the outline, but I'm very intentionally putting Africa out here. The sole reason for this is that over the next 2 decades alone, India's cooling demand will be equivalent to the entire electricity consumption of the continent of Africa. That is the sheer scale at which this industry is sort of growing, and the kind of demand that we'll need to address over the next couple of decades. And just to back up some facts that I know that have already been mentioned, 50% of India's peak electricity demand in India will be for cooling. Come summer and in the next few months, we'll see it here witnessing in the country. And the demand, because of cooling, is going to increase by tenfold because of all these things that are happening in the country today. And it's reaching a stage where sustainable cooling is no more an option, but in a very real sense, a deal breaker. The presentation that I'm going to be making today is going to try and highlight why this is so and how we can address this in as sustainable a manner as we can.
All of us are realizing that cooling is, if not already a necessity, I think it will become a necessity to tackle the heat stress and other things. So I just want to lay that point very clearly. Maharashtra is supposed to have about 15% of India's GDP. Okay, so out of this, I'm saying that if we are looking at 10 million TR, 1.5 million TR is probably happening in Maharashtra, in of course Mumbai and Pune and Nagpur and Thane and all these places that we are talking about.
The climate is going to get hotter and hotter, and therefore for people, to protect people, we need to bring our temperatures down to see that people don't suffer, die, or are at the receiving end of any health issues. So I think we need to communicate that well with the people. I think it's very important for us to shift that emphasis from air conditioning or district cooling to something that is for the betterment of the larger population in the light of climate change.
Mumbai's Environment and Climate Action Department, we had undertaken certain pilot projects. Like first, we have concentrated on urban forest. Now we have considered Andheri area for creating such urban forest. Around 3 acres of land is converted into urban forest and wetland, where about 10,000 saplings have been planted. And the temperature difference what we have observed before after is about 3 degrees. So phase 2 and phase 3 there would be more such projects along the Mithi river, and about 55,000 saplings would be planted after.
I also think that there are several initiatives which are being pushed through. For example, if you think about smart cities, of which we already are seeing things in Gift City, seeing things in the Raipur, in Gurgaon for that matter, in several pockets, or perhaps in BKC as well. So in these pockets, I think one can definitely experiment with this. And I think one of the experiences in India is that you do not have public policy here which is driven only from the top down. And I think that is one of the most beautiful, complex, as well as perplexing things about this country, right?
So while you spoke about that it is probably the regulations or the BE has 18 degrees as a threshold, but even why do they have that as a threshold? I would say that because savings on cooling is not in the front and center of either the regulation makers or consumers, and that is really what PPPs or a very well designed PPP with the right approach could sort, and then communicate it to the larger world to make it what is known as Man Ki Baat, because that's what renewable energy became, a Man Ki Baat, right? So that is really possibly what is needed.
So I think the Indian customization and the Indian adaptation and the way we grow also plays a huge role in the terms of what kind of impact you bring in, especially in terms of energy efficiency, cooling. And residential, it's very difficult to implement common infrastructure projects, whereas it could be that much more interesting to do it across commercial premises. Like I have been looking at various options of sensor-based energy efficiencies in commercial towers. So district cooling is a great opportunity, and as he said, at least we can start somewhere given all the infrastructure that we are doing. And even in Powai, for the commercial offices and for the new development that we're planning, we can probably do a mini retrofit and say that we can start off from.
While we may add capacity from 250 gigawatts to 700 gigawatts, which is almost to 450 gigawatts, which should come largely from renewables, there's almost an equal or close enough measure of increase in cooling demand. So it's like whatever we are doing to run faster and faster on the treadmill to add more capacity is going towards just this. So the question is, can there be more integrated, holistic practices that we can adopt on the demand side than just looking at on the supply side, which is where we feel something like district cooling can come into the mix. And I think, a lot of people talk of district cooling as a technology, and I think, while it is of course a technology and as a way of doing things, there already is a lot of adoption of the technology in India at this point of time. Like many developments at a campus level, a captive level, airports and so on already use the technology. So what we want to focus on more than the technology part is more on the how do we implement this at a broader scale from a standpoint of policy planning and at larger scale than just a small campus and so on. And before going into that, I think, just to quickly kind of showcase why this might make sense within the urban planning context. Most of you must be aware of what district cooling is, right? Essentially, what we're talking about is then each building meeting the cooling demand. We're just aggregating it centrally, and that can happen for 4 buildings, 5 buildings, or much larger, depending upon how good our planning is. Once we can aggregate demand for a cluster of buildings and bring it together to one place, that in itself starts bringing about possibilities for a lot of energy efficiency vis-a-vis our current approach of course, having buildings certified as a green building and trying to make only that one building more energy efficient, so to say. So essentially, it's a model or a market model where demand can be aggregated, like I said, across a cluster of buildings. Once the aggregation happens, the choice of technology and equipment that you put can be far more energy efficient than your window and the split units and so on and so forth. That in itself helps in reducing power demand by up to 50% compared to what you're comparing with.
As there were some of the questions, and also it was mentioned in Anson's presentation, that we first need to reduce our consumption. So passive measures first. We need to look at all the passive measures that we could bring in inside our buildings, reduce the energy consumption for cooling, for any other utility also, for any other equipment level energy consumption also inside the building, and then district cooling makes sense. It brings down the capacity, it brings down the energy consumption, it reduces the refrigerant use, the urban heat island effect is mitigated with the use of it. We can bring in more and more resource circularity into the concept. We can use all the solid, municipal waste, the solid, liquid, and so on.